Over the past month, I've been playing the fantastic Nintendo Switch remaster of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. I originally had this game on the Wii, but I only played a couple hours of it due to being distracted by other games that were coming out at the time. If you played Skyward Sword, then you know it's a very slow start, so I was a bit put off by that. So I was very pleased that Nintendo decided to remaster Skyward Sword, as I wanted to find out what I had missed the first time around. I'm pleased to say it is a good to great Zelda experience, but not on the level of such classics as Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, and of course, Breath of the Wild. The reasons why Skyward Sword is not on that level will be explored in this video, and as a result of these flaws, it became apparent to me why Breath of the Wild had to happen. But just before we get cracking with the knacking, this is Just Good Games, and I would like you to do one more thing for me, and that is go down there and hit that subscribe button, please. If I were to do a tier list for the Legend of Zelda games, and that might happen soon, so look out for that, I would probably put Skyward Sword in the B tier. All Zelda games are a very high level, so they sort of operate on their own scale, if you know what I mean. A B level Zelda game is like an A level normal game, so Skyward Sword is a good game by normal standards, but is a bit off the pace for a Zelda game, and this is down to a few minor to major flaws. Even though it doesn't have any real bearing on the points I'm trying to make in this video, I would be foolish not to bring up one of the main flaws of the original Skyward Swords, and that was the flaws in the control system. This game first came out on the Wii, and a lot of combat was based on using the Wiimote. It was meant to be a showcase for the new Motion Plus attachment that was supposed to improve the responsiveness of the Wiimote. It sort of did this, but not to the level that I think Nintendo were hoping for. We all saw that disaster of Nintendo E3 conference in 2011, where the great Miyamoto was trying to play this game. The motion controls are an integral part of the combat and overall gameplay of the Wii version of Skyward Sword. So with that being a bit dicey, we were not off to the greatest of starts. A lot of the bosses and enemies require you to slash in specific directions at just the right time to defeat them. So if the Wiimote was unresponsive, then you can understand people's frustrations with this game when it originally came out. The controls have been revamped for the new HD remaster on the Switch, and although still not perfect, it was much improved and did not impact my enjoyment of the game. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of what I perceive to be Skyward Sword's flaws. I kept feeling like I had done all of this before. Nintendo is known for its innovation, but this game was far from it. To start off with, although the story tries to be a bit different, it's still very much the same basic Zelda story in the way that it's structured. Spoiler alert now, just in case you haven't played it. I would also like to note before I go into it, but I understand that one of the main points of this game is starting the cycle that would go on forever and ever in the original game. Starting the cycle for the Battle of the Triforce, the quest of the hero, the goddess, and defeating the great evil. But this could still be presented in a different way. First, Zelda goes missing, like in so many Zelda games. Then you have to collect 3 different coloured items, like in Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time. Then you have to power up the Master Sword, and then you have to find the pieces of the Triforce. All of this happens in so many of the Legend of Zelda games, and although I still enjoyed it, I did find myself getting bored at points, and that has never happened in a Zelda game before. There is a reason why Majora's Mask is such a beloved Zelda game, as it really does change up the story and structure of how the story is told. Same a bit with the recent awesome remake of Link's Awakening. I really enjoyed that game because it was a bit different, still had dungeon stuff, but the structure was just different. Next up is the fact that you have to go back to the same areas about 3 times to do different stuff, and then repeat what you did in one area in another area. This would be tedious in a normal game, but in a game which doesn't really change up the formula from past games in its series, it gets really tedious going back to another area, doing the same thing, going to another area, doing the same thing. There's also a boss that you have to fight about 3 or 4 times over the course of the game. It is pretty much the same fight every time, and it is not a good fight. All of this screams that Nintendo was starting to run out of ideas for Zelda in this format. I would like to say that this video is not a rant on how bad this game is. The dungeons and boss designs are still top notch Zelda, and the puzzles are really fun. It's still an enjoyable game, and it's still a good game. But as I said, I feel like I had done all this before, and I think we all just hold the Zelda games at such a higher standard. It's all the same puzzles, items, weapons, and story. I'm pretty sure Nintendo realised this. And I reckon they knew that if they release another game in this similar style on the Switch, that it might have diminishing returns, as Skyward Sword did not sell that well in Japan. While critics loved it, fans at the time had the same views that I am talking about now, and I'm playing the improved version of it. It felt like Zelda was stuck in the past, reliving old glories and failing to move with the modern gaming world. Luckily, Nintendo did what some gaming companies should do more often, and that is listen to the fans. They took the Legend of Zelda games, looked at what it was at its core, and stripped everything away. They made the Casino Royale of Legend of Zelda games. So Nintendo stripped away everything, the dungeons, the items, the weapons, the puzzles, the story and the structure. They took away everything that made Zelda Zelda and distilled it down to what Zelda was at its core, adventure and freedom. The original Legend of Zelda game on the NES was all about this. You had to collect the 8 pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom from the 8 dungeons and then take on the evil Ganon. Yes, it had dungeons, like all other Zelda games, but you could do any dungeon in any order you wanted to, except the final one. It was even possible to reach and defeat the final boss without getting the sword at the start, which is pretty vital to the combat. There were secret caves and items to find, but none of this was signposted for you. You had to find all of this out for yourself. This sounds a bit like Breath of the Wild, doesn't it? But Breath takes this freedom to even more extremes. It almost sounds like a bit of an oxymoron to say that via modernising, the Legend of Zelda games went back to its roots, but that is exactly what happened. We all know that open world games have been what the gaming industry has been about for pretty much the last decade now. Breath of the Wild is probably the first truly open world modern Zelda game. You could do what you wanted when you wanted. The only story that was laid out for you at the beginning of the game is that you, Link, have awoken from an 100-year sleep, and you must go and defeat Ganon, who has been sealed away in Hyrule Castle by Zelda. And that's it. There's a lot more backstory to this and a lot more story to this game. But if you don't want to do it, if you don't want to find out, you don't have to. Everything is optional. The 4 sort of dungeons, divine beasts can be taken on, but they can be done in any order you want to. And you don't even have to do any of them, or you can do a couple of them. It's all up to you. If you really wanted to, you could go straight from when you enter the Great Plateau and take on Ganon if you wish. It's not advised, as it would be very, very difficult. I've seen people do it on YouTube. It's a fascinating watch. There's so much to do and discover in Breath of the Wild, and you do it all in a non-linear fashion. There's shrines, side quests, puzzles, divine beasts, memories to find and exploration to do. It is the complete opposite to Skyward Sword and a lot of the Zelda games that have come before that give you the illusion of freedom. It's not even vital that you find the Master Sword in this game. I really enjoyed Breath of the Wild at the time. It's not my favourite Zelda game, but it's definitely top 5/3. The thing is, when I was playing Breath of the Wild, I was like, this is amazing. But I wish I had this much freedom, but with some proper dungeons, some more classic Zelda items and weapons, and maybe a bit more structure. I was thinking they would potentially do some of this in the sequel, but now I honestly don't think it needs any of this. Maybe a bit more side missions and a bit more actual side missions which have like story to it, but that's about it. In going back and playing Skyward Sword, I now appreciate how good Breath of the Wild is, even more than I did before, and I completely understand why Nintendo did what they did. Breath of the Wild had to happen because it became abundantly clear that the old Zelda formula was wearing thin and a reinvention was needed. This and all of what I have stated before is why Breath of the Wild had to happen. Thank you for making it to the end of this video and listening to my ramblings. I really appreciate it. I don't even know what people can gain from this video, but I just had to make this video. So thank you for watching again. Now go down there, hit that subscribe button, like, share, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter. The Twitch streams will be starting again soon, so keep an eye out on that. And thank you again for watching, and you have been watching Just Good Games.